Hi, Aileen. This is a little bit of corrective for the Excel sheet that you did for problem 310. You had it almost correct. You had asked me a couple questions, and I found a couple lingering issues in here. And the first thing that I would say is, this image that you did a nice screenshot and pushed it into Excel. You took a screenshot, dropped it into Excel. That's a really good idea. But what you really should do is color all that in. Actually, do it live inside your spreadsheet here. So I'm going to add a line here, a few extra lines, okay? And then you would normally take this and draw it. I'm not sure if you do or don't understand what they did to draw that in there, but you could just color. What they did is a bar graph here. They basically took a bunch of cells and they painted it red, okay? So wherever you need red. And the reason that you can do that live, now the numbers below it in your spreadsheet, you could do a quick check. The whole idea behind this is to give anybody that's reading it a visual and they can understand what the timing is on this without the numbers. And then this is basically the Gantt chart, if you will, that you have up here, but in numbers, with the numbers down here. Okay, so do go through, what I mean by this is you do want to take something like this, I'm going to Control X, move it out of there, and I'm going to lay it in here where it should be. And you can see that now this line here would be your development. So I can just copy that up here, boom, like that. Pilot testing was delayed. That I use a Control C and then a Control V to drop it in there, okay? So you really do want to draw this image in so you could just visually look up. And it's also for your readers that they can understand it too. So as a matter of fact, let's make it accurate. Okay, so pilot testing was a couple months here, as was the ramp up. I just want to go far enough so you can understand what I'm doing here. And the thing about Excel is you can run around and can cut and paste pretty quickly. All right, and then the marketing support starts here. So just to get one more line, you can continue and do the rest of it. So we drew in the line where marketing and support is active on the calendar. So it's basically a quarterly calendar. All right. And I'm getting squeezed for space here, but I guess I could do the production and sales. Production sales all happens from year 2 Q1. So why not be complete? I'm going to be lazy and complete. Control C. I'm going to use these red bars. Boom. Okay. And then now we have live what you brought in as a screenshot. Okay, so I'm going to delete that, get that out of there. You can dress this up even more, whatever way you want to, but now let's get down to the numbers. Okay, so there was a problem when we take a look at your cash flow. You were a little bit maybe too quick on the two sums. One, it's revenue minus sales minus your costs, okay? So this first sector was 29 to 31, but you understand that sales revenue is just a calculation of sales volume times sale price, so you don't add those together. So what you would want to do is fix this to say we really just want B31. Okay, so we'll get rid of the sum, get rid of the sum. Okay, and then when we look at B31 is the revenues minus the sum of expenses, you have 22 through 28, 22 through 25 makes sense, but then we have the same thing here where we have a production volume times the production cost, and that gives us our total costs here of 1 million, right? So that's a little bit too far, so let's go back. Let's say we want B22 to B25, and in Excel you can hit comma and add in 28. So now we want B28, add that in there. Okay. Now the number here didn't change, but it was hiding a mistake in there that ended up propagating through or manifesting itself in the later quarters, right? So now we can take that and we can grab the handle and share that among all the columns or all the quarters. And before I go ahead and fix anything, we're showing the pound sign where it can't fit in the cell. What we're going to do is change that to accounting. And we're going to drop the decimal places or the pennies, right? Okay, and it actually fit again, okay? So let's do a quick check on this. Alt equals is a keyboard shortcut. It'll try to guess what you want to add. You use this so often in Excel. Sum is so frequent that they give it a nice quick Alt equals being the keyboard shortcut. Hit enter, and that looks good to me. I think that's the right number there. Okay, so let's take a look at the present value. Okay, now there's a little something about these problems that I think I explained in the video. The problems in the book value present value at the beginning of a term. Okay, and so you're probably going to be a little bit off because you have, in many cases in real life, you were correct. The quarters are numbered 1 through 16. That makes sense when we use this calculation that you came up with. You got the right equation or formula in there, right? That seems to work, okay? But what ends up happening is, because the problem says evaluate at the beginning of a period, we're going to have to do something tricky here. We're going to have to number these 0 through 15. Without getting into it too much, that makes it evaluate at the beginning of a period rather than at the end of a period. I'll go over that in class. Okay, if you notice the first quarter, nothing really changes here, maybe the second and third. Okay, so basically with one quick fix up at the top here, we were able to repair something that went awry, a little awry. So I'm going to come over here and copy down the formula, and I'm pretty sure that that's the right NPV for 16 quarters. Evaluated at the beginning of a period. So we'll name this total. You can do a much neater job if you care to. But generally, the total column, something like this, you're going to paint in gold or bright yellow, something like that. Usually when you see a spreadsheet, so you know that this is a summation of something going on here, right? So see, we could actually take the sum of all these numbers, and now we can do some data analytics. We can double check, make sure everything's right. Remember, we had $1 million to spread over 3 quarters. Great, it added back up to $1 million again. We had 200,000 to spend over 2 quarters. That looks good. Okay, so we came in and we came out with these are basically your checks. Make sure everything's right. We had $400,000 as far as ramp up goes, and then they never really gave us this number. I think they gave us 125 or something per quarter. Okay, so our whatever the number is here, it was B6, which is marketing. 150,000 per year spread over 4 quarters gives you that. Let's take a look at that. Right. Okay. Right. So we can use these sums here as a check to make sure you're getting the right information there. Okay. Oh, Control Z. I didn't want to do that. I'm not going to touch the formatting that you have here then. Okay. Okay. So then what we did here, you did the project NPV. What you have down here, let's put it in gold because that's what we were after for this problem. And, it works because I added it over here. You had already added it over here. Okay. So now let's take a look at how you use Excel. Okay. What's really good about this problem is you should have an understanding about how NPV is calculated, how present value is calculated down here through this equation. Oh, let's see, through this equation here. Okay. But there are formula in Excel. I believe there's an NPV. So let's just do an Excel NPV. I believe there's an NPV in here. Equals NPV. See if it pops up. It returns present value of an investment based on a discount rate series of future payments, right? Okay. So we want to know the rate. The first element is the rate. Let's go find the rate is here, divided by 4. And then it wants all the values. So we're going to take all our values, just give them all the values. I believe that's all it needs. And it came up with a slightly different number, and that's because there's the problem with using the NPV on the problems that we're doing is it calculates it only at the end of a period, not at the beginning like we did. And that's why you can't use the NPV here very easily. Okay, we could trick it a little bit, but not too easily, right? So I'm just going to let that one go. I think what we need to do, if you can bear with me on this, is let's do this again. Let's calculate this, but instead of B33, we're going to start with C33, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to add this number back in there, and I think we get the right number. And that we do. Notice we get the right number. It has to do with the NPV does not have an option in there to tell it whether you're calculating at the beginning or the end. So I fooled it by telling it that the first period was over here on C, which is actually the second period. But it's a little trick if you think about it. Makes sense. You don't have to understand that, but if you do want to, we can talk about it a little bit more. It's an encumbrance on this problem. I wish they didn't do in this book. I wish they evaluated all the periods at the end of the period. I'm just going to change the format so we get rid of the pennies on that. Boom. Okay, so I just showed you that you could use the NPV here, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to drive. So let's use the other Excel formula, present value, to actually come up with the period calculations that we did by hand up here. Okay, so we use the present value. Take some practice using this, and it's something I recommend because if you're dealing with loans like your school loans, house loans, car loans, anything else at business when you're working on debt, okay, you're going to want to use these formula, okay? And so the little bit of trickery that we have to deal with is that these problems, if you read the problem carefully, you'll never insert the correct answer in the Connect system if you're calculating this as though all the calculations were done at the end of every period. If you read the problem, it says we calculated at the beginning of the period, okay? It's a little bit of a complication, but we're going to make it work here. We can use these formulas. I just want to show you that sometimes you have to think things through here. I'm going to give you an example. It goes beyond what you need to do for this actual problem to get the correct answer for the homework, but this is what you would do. You'd use the present value in real life, so to speak. Okay, so the rate, we're going to grab the rate, is going to be equals 8% over 4. And something that we have to not forget to do is we need that as an absolute reference. So we're going to hit that with an F4, okay? And that will put the dollar signs in front of it. And so it doesn't change when we drag it across the columns, okay? So the next thing is what period are we in, okay? This is going to be the number of periods that the money is out of your hands, okay? So since we're doing this at the beginning of the term, of the period, we're going to use these same indices across the tops of the columns for our calculations here. Okay, so we're going to use that at 0 for this. It wants to know what payment. We say 0. Okay, we're just talking about flat out receiving at this point. We've already calculated all the outflows and inflows, and this is the net inflows period by period. Okay, so we're not putting out anything here. We're just getting a payment back in. What's the future value? We can click it. Okay, so we got a future value there. And by way of this formula, this last argument of the 5, what type? By default, it's 0 at the end of the period. We need to select the one beginning of the period. Okay, put a 1 in there, close it out, and we hit enter. Okay, so far so good, except we have a positive number in here versus the negative. We're net negative. So by convention, what we need to do is put a minus sign in here. And we're going to change the format of this before we drag it across. So here's changing the format of it. We're going to go to Home. We're going to change it to an accounting format. Drop the pennies off it. Okay. And then if we drag this across, let's see what we get. Okay. Now all these numbers should be the same as our NPV that we did by hand, the long form of it. And look at that. There's a formula right inside Excel that gives us the same numbers. And just to be sure, we're going to say Alt equals. Let's do a quick sum on that. And sure enough, 8503043 is what we were after. Okay. And so you can calculate the NPV this way. Net PV is add up net, add them all up. Net NPV at 8%, 16 quarters, 8 mil, 503,000. So you have to be careful in contracts when you sign up and say, sure, give me $10 million over this profile of time over 4 years, 4 quarters, 16 payments. You have to realize that if you have 8% interest or 8% inflation, either of those, then the value of your money is decreasing over that time. Really, if you look at the inflation. So what do? You have to actually work it the other way and figure out how much you should be paid at the end to make it worth $10 million in today's dollars. And contracts actually account for this. There's actually an adjustment factor that's put into payments in a contract that will read not only with this, but probably some other things that might cause some industry. You might take a look at some industry ratios or something that tells us, we don't lose money on this deal and both sides come out in an equitable position on this. So that's how you would get through this problem. I went a little bit beyond what you really need, but you can see how to do it in Excel, which is one goal out of all this, is to say, you know what, there's a way to do this in Excel. There's formulas involved. But I'm glad you did it the longhand form. That should be it. Hopefully that helps you.